Imagine standing on the verge of winning the top prize of £1 million on a hit TV game show, only for your incredibly subtle cheating method to be exposed. How did he manage to fool the production team and hundreds of audience members right under their noses? Today, we're talking about the biggest game show scandal in television history, Major Charles Ingram's attempt to become a millionaire. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire is a British quiz show that began airing in 1998. Each episode invited 10 contestants to compete for a chance at the grand prize. The first stage, Fastest Finger First, required contestants to correctly sequence 4 options within 15 seconds. The fastest contestant would then move on to the main stage to compete for the £1 million prize. The show had 2 safety nets. If a contestant answered 5 questions and then 10 questions correctly, they would guarantee a certain amount of prize money, even if they answered subsequent questions incorrectly. Contestants also had 3 lifelines: Ask the Audience, Phone a Friend, and 50:50, which eliminated 2 incorrect answers. This show was incredibly popular, with many celebrities participating. However, winning £1 million was incredibly difficult. On September 9, 2001, British Army Major Charles Ingram appeared on the show. His wife, Diana Ingram, and brother-in-law, Adrian Pollock, had both previously competed and won £32,000 each. The Ingrams were big fans of the show, and Charles came prepared. He successfully navigated the Fastest Finger First round, securing his spot on stage to challenge for the £1 million. The first 5 questions were relatively easy, and Ingram answered them smoothly, passing the first safety net. This meant he had guaranteed prize money. However, as the questions got harder, Ingram began to struggle. When faced with a question about a British rock band, he still didn't know the answer. He used his Phone a Friend lifeline, then his 50:50 lifeline. His friend gave him the correct answer, and he successfully passed the 7th question. At this point, he had only 1 lifeline left and 8 more questions to go. Everyone held their breath, believing his chances of reaching the end were slim to none. It was then that the show's producers announced that filming for the day was over. Charles Ingram would return the next day to continue his challenge. When Ingram returned to challenge the 8th question, his demeanor had completely changed from the previous day. He was no longer decisive. He hesitated constantly, swaying between different options. This is when the cheating began. When asked a question about a band, Ingram, who admitted to not knowing much about music, used his last lifeline, 50:50, eliminating 2 incorrect answers. He then pondered the remaining options, A1 and D, Baha Men. He initially stated he'd only heard of A1. However, when it came time to give his final answer, he inexplicably chose D. He later explained that whenever he guessed at home, his correct answers turned out to be wrong, so he decided to do the opposite this time. Surprisingly, he was correct, winning £32,000. Now, only 5 questions separated him from £1 million. For the 11th question, his answering method remained the same. He would read out the options, and then a strategic cough from the audience would signal the correct answer. In this manner, he correctly answered 3 questions in a row. Up until this point, the production team hadn't suspected Charles Ingram. As Ingram approached the final 2 questions, the production team started to feel something was off. Let's look at how he answered the 14th question, which involved European cities. He read out the options. When he read B, Paris, a distinct cough was heard from the audience. Immediately, he changed his mind and confidently declared C. This sudden shift even left the host speechless. But the most obvious moment came with the 15th and final question, the one worth £1 million. As usual, he read out the 4 options. He then paused, expressing confusion about one of the options, Google, a very large number. He said he had never heard of it. But then, a loud cough was heard from the audience. Despite his earlier confusion, he confidently declared A, Google, as his answer. The sudden, inexplicable change in his confidence even prompted the host to ask why. Usually, if a contestant is unsure, they can walk away. His answering method was highly unusual. The show's producers had a contingency plan. The £1 million check could only be cashed on September 18, 2001, a week after the show. This gave them time. Immediately after the recording, the production team reviewed the entire show. They quickly noticed the suspicious coughing sounds, confirming that Ingram had indeed cheated using an accomplice. This expert in the audience, it turned out, knew practically everything except music. It's important to remember this was 2001. Mobile phones and the internet weren't as advanced, so looking up answers on the spot was impossible. If this accomplice was so brilliant, why didn't they just compete themselves and win the £1 million? The production team then reviewed footage of the audience. They discovered that 19 distinct coughs occurred precisely when Ingram was answering questions. All 19 coughs came from one man, Tequin Whittock. He was a university lecturer and was scheduled to be a contestant on a future episode of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? The show's producers believed the three of them, Charles, Diana, and Tequin, had conspired to cheat. The aftermath and conflicting accounts. After the show, Charles Ingram and his wife returned to the dressing room. Staff overheard them arguing loudly. One staff member claimed Diana was furious, telling Charles he should have stopped earlier because his cheating on the last few questions was too obvious. Facing prosecution by the show's producers, Charles Ingram defended himself. He claimed there were 192 coughs in total during the show, and since the episode hadn't been broadcast, how could anyone know if the coughs were indeed signals? He also stated that the host, in a later interview, said he hadn't heard any obvious coughs during the live recording, only that Ingram's behavior was puzzling. Ingram explained his sudden relief from coughing, he had a persistent cough the day before, was due to drinking water after the show. He argued that the alignment of coughs with correct answers was pure coincidence. Interestingly, Tequin Whittock had also competed on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but only won £1,000. He claimed Ingram had promised him a share of the prize money as compensation. Perhaps they never expected that Tequin Whittock would happen to know the answers to those exact questions. On April 7, 2003, Charles and Diana Ingram were convicted of procuring the execution of a valuable security by deception and fined £15,000. Tequin Whittock was sentenced to 12 months in prison and fined £10,000. After his release, Whittock gave multiple interviews, still maintaining his innocence and denying any cheating.